Huge day in world football. That is, of course, because the Women's World Cup has kicked off. It has begun. Match day one is in the books. If I was more of an athlete, I would spin the mini match ball I have in my hand on my finger, but I
Ooh.
won't. So instead, I'm just going to play with it like a fidget spinner for the rest of the show. And the day ended, admittedly, on a very began on a somber and scary note with a mass shooting in Auckland just hours before the first game kicked off. Nowhere near Eden Park. The CBD is about 15 to 20 minutes away, but enough to certainly shake a nation that was just about to hold a national or international competition. Moments of silence were held before the kickoff, both in Auckland and in Australia as well when the tournaments got underway. And it was brilliant for the host nations. They both got their wins to lead their respective groups. We will talk about all of that in a moment, but Canada begins tonight. They play Nigeria from 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time this evening, and Christine Sinclair addressed the media with some big news, and the timing of it couldn't have been better. Let's have a listen.
Yeah, I mean, it's done. We're just not focused on it anymore. It's, about to get done. So honestly, we haven't thought about it for one second these past couple of weeks, just focusing on playing. You know, the world of women's football is very small, and we all support each other. I feel like each women's team has to face their battles, and it's one at a time. And obviously this past year we've been facing ours in Nigeria now with their federation. So we fully support them. I mean, every single player in this tournament deserves the world, and deserves the equal treatment from their federations. The women's game has got a long way to go to catch up to the men's game. You know, it's new comparative to the men's game. That being said, although our prize money continues to increase, we're nowhere near where it should be. Look, I'm fighting for equality. It needs to be the exact same as the men's tournament, and hopefully at the next tournament that will be the case. As players, we expect that to be the case, but it's kind of out of our hands.
So me being a poor host did not tee that question up. I should have said that a deal was close to being done to make you understand. I'm sure you put it together, but she addressed the fact that a deal with the Canadian Soccer Association is done or nearly done and should be announced very, very soon. The words from Christine Sinclair. And that's a big relief to a lot of supporters of the women's national team. For supporters of pay equity, we'll get the details when it's announced, but they obviously would not have signed a deal that they didn't agree, however long that deal might be, whether it's a bridge just to get through a World Cup year. We'll find that information out when we can. Oliver Platt, your reaction to Christine Sinclair's comments today?
Yeah, well, my understanding when I last kind of looked for an update on this was that the women would likely sign a short-term agreement that doesn't require the men's national team to also come to their own agreement, just basically something between them and Canada Soccer to bridge them and to get them, whether it's through the rest of this year or whatever the timeline is, in order to obviously be compensated at the World Cup and so on. So that could have changed. I'd be delighted if it has, and we have a full CBA coming here between all three sides. I'd be surprised if that's the case. But I don't think getting something done for the women specifically, again, just to kind of tide them over while we try and come to this full agreement between all three parties, I don't think that was ever too much of a concern. And it's good to hear that it seems to be out of the way and sorted before the tournament starts for Canada.
That's my understanding as well. The latest I heard was that the lawyers from both the men's national team and the women's national team were still negotiating. So I believe that this is just going to be a short-term deal, which is smart for the women to sign before they play. And I don't know if pen has been put to paper yet, because in case you lay a goose egg in this tournament and you don't go deep, it kind of protects you in terms of what you're going to get paid on the outset. Just an objective statement just based upon some of what she said about the prize money, because this is something that's going around. Canada's fight's been a little bit different than Nigeria, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, gentlemen. Nigeria, I don't think that they were going to pay the women at the World Cup. Is that
their biggest dispute, Nigeria, with their federation was that FIFA was going to take the prize money and give it to the federation, sort of blindly trusting them to do the right thing and disperse it. That is the crux of what Nigeria was not happy with, because they do not trust the federation to do the right thing and make sure the money gets to where it needs to go.
Right.
Some federation or some FIFA money will go right to the players.
I think it was also that the Nigerian federation was using the new FIFA prize money and guaranteed money as an excuse not to pay their own
right. Their appearance fees.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
So I mean, there's really no comparison there to what the Canadian women are fighting versus the Nigerian players. And look, the English players suspended negotiations with the English FA ahead of this tournament. Name a country that's not in negotiations trying to set the new normal. And this all comes off the U.S. Soccer Federation coming to that landmark deal that took 6 years. But I'm just presenting this all objectively. These are the facts. 6 years to come up with a structure, not only for pay equity, but you heard Christine say it there, it's equal treatment. This is about programmatic spend. That's what it's become now. And I think that it's oftentimes, and far too often, misreported or reported incorrectly or not enough in the media, which is leading to all kinds of problems. Like pay equity is something that I think it's a non-starter, at least for the women within the Canadian Soccer Association. And I'll go back to this. There was a deal on the table that would have seen both the men's and women's national team players receive at least $138,000 for each player, even if the women's national team doesn't get out of the group at this World Cup, and that number goes up. And that's the thing about equal pay in terms of the men's and women's World Cups. That's something that the women are striving for. But for the Canadian players, it doesn't really matter to them because what's being approached and applied is equal pay, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, guys. Like the prize money is pooled between the men's and the women's programs, and it's split evenly between the men's and the women's players. So this is a much more of a statement, a big picture perspective. There's also lots of questions about, well, why is this the case? And don't shoot the messenger. I'm just providing what the rationale of FIFA would be, is that these are two entirely different competitions under the same banner of FIFA. The qualifying campaigns are done differently between the men's and the women's, just in terms of the games played in the past to qualifying for the World Cup. Broadcast rights are sold separately. We just went through a row in Europe where broadcasters in major European nations were unwilling to pay what FIFA believed were acceptable levels to air women's FIFA Women's World Cup games. Sponsorships are sold separately from tournament to tournament. So that's what FIFA will say, is that the economics between the men's and the women's tournaments are just completely different, even though that they kind of overarch and oversee both. And they'll look at both competitions kind of as standalone events separate from one another. Whether that's right or wrong, that's up for you to decide, but that will be their rationale in terms of the way that things stand. Like, it's not like Wimbledon, right? Where Wimbledon's on at the same time, both tournaments, same television contract, same television deal. They're run simultaneously. So there are some intricacies that make these different things, even though it's the same sport and kind of the same title and stuff like that. So I'm not sure if you guys want to weigh on that. I'm just kind of giving kind of the state of play. And I think that's kind of fair to where both sides sit on this issue.
Yeah, no, that's all fair. I think I think where the women's players would argue is that while the women's game has been underinvested in for so long and hasn't been given the same opportunities for so long, it's been like in England, one of the biggest football countries in the world, it was banned for a long time, women's football, right? And so the argument is that now you need to make up for that and overinvest in terms of the parity between the men's and women's game, in order to give the women what they deserve and get back to kind of a level playing field. But Wills is right that the World Cup prize money comes into Canada Soccer as a federation, and then Canada Soccer is saying we're going to split this evenly between men and women. And so the difficulty is that there are, whether people want to believe it or not, because I know we like to think that everyone's in favor of equal pay, there are some men's players in countries around the world who do not want to see their World Cup prize money diminished in order to achieve equal pay. So that becomes a lot easier, and you don't have to have those arguments if the prize money for the men's World Cup and the women's World Cup is an equal number coming into the federation. But obviously we could we have the ability within our own federation to make sure that both of our national teams get an equal share of that prize money. It just means everyone, men's players, women's players, federation, has to sign up for it.
Yep, nothing more to add in terms of the nuts.
And we're still not. We're still doesn't seem like we're close to that.
No,
Right.
and I think that's a very fair point to make. Is it does not seem, from the conversations we've had, from the different journalists and players and stakeholders, that we're not as close as we should be. And Ollie, I love that too, where you say, you remind everyone that football for women was banned in England once upon a time, and the fact that they were asked to be the footballers during wartime so that the people at home could still go and enjoy football. It was the women who were the ones providing that entertainment and building a lot of these clubs over the years. And now, as soon as the men came back from war, the women weren't allowed to play football anymore. That just shows you the decades of garbage that these women have had to put up with. And I always come back to this too, and I think you make very good points about the different levels of FIFA men's competitions, FIFA women's competition. It's about setting the precedent, and equality is always, if I'm looking at a 5-foot fence and Ollie's looking at a 9-foot fence and you give us the same ladder, that's equality, but it doesn't help Ollie because he's got a bigger fence. Equity gives him a bigger ladder so he can see over.
I want, like, a lot of this is playing out for the national teams, which I still maintain, this is my personal thought, it's like an honor and a privilege to represent your country. I wonder when some of these conversations or pressure or protest, whatever you want to call it, are turned to the professional club setup. Like, these are individual entities that go out and, like, should be paying the bulk, the lion's share of any player's salary. Where are these professional teams stepping up? Like, the CSA paid for a decade NWSL salaries of their national team players. A decade. It didn't stop that long ago. Like, in order to make sure that livable wages are being paid and in the pursuit of this, like, don't the professional clubs need to jump on board as well? It's just, perhaps I'm missing something, but you know, that seems to be the place where alternative focus should be put. No, I'm not just saying that this battle that's being fought right now isn't worthwhile. In addition to, it seems like there's a little bit of a gap there, and I'm always a little bit surprised by why. Or why not?
We will park this conversation because there is no easy answer and there is more to get to. But that is the update that we can provide you right now in the words from Christine Sinclair. To the tournament itself, I mentioned the results already. Group A and B have officially begun. It was New Zealand getting the first goal of the tournament, getting the first win for a New Zealand national team at a World Cup in more than 2 decades. And the scoreline probably should have been a little bit higher.
Oliver Platt-Jigs. Oliver Platt-Jigs.
Eden Park into raptures with her goal in the 48th minute. They could have had a second on a penalty that went off the top right corner and stayed out, but it was the win, and it brought Ali Riley to near tears in the press conference afterwards, right on the pitch, just speaking. Everyone at Eden Park was listening to the captain speak, and she spoke to the journey and everything and the moment. It was pretty incredible scenes in Auckland. Then to Australia and Ireland. The Irish played the Aussies pretty tough, and the big news just before the game was that Sam Kerr was not going to play, nor would she play match number 2 against Nigeria. She posted to Instagram saying she pulled up with the calf, she would be unavailable. She's up in the air for that third and final game against Canada, but that was a huge blow for the Aussies. They were able to get their win over the Irish by 1-0, a Steph Catley penalty, and those are the results from match day number 1. Let's talk about Canada's game tonight.
Hold on, Adam. You don't want to talk about Oliver Platt jinxing Norway?
We should.
Their front 3 as good as any in this tournament. They are my dark horse. Blah, 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 blah. That was Tuesday. We're here on Thursday. What do you have to say now, Ollie? I followed you. I made a bet, Norway, on Tony Bet.
Don't do that.
And I went bust. You owe me money, buddy. You owe me
Blame
money.
the magic pen. Checks and balances
I certainly
are back.
did not recommend that. It's much like my dark horse. It's much like my dark horse pick of Turkey in the men's Euros a few years ago. Just an absolutely shambolic start. Not good. I'll say quickly on Sam Kerr. Like, obviously, none of us want to see a player that good missing time in the tournament. There's already too many of them on the sidelines right now. But it is something for Canada that's probably good news here. Like a 1-0 win over Ireland, like immediately you're looking at that result and thinking Canada might be able to better that and get themselves in pole position in this group. So that's a big development, I think, as far as Canada are concerned.
And can you believe clarity when it comes to an injury, just coming out and flat out admitting that you have a calf problem? This is something new. No, my game, she's out over the next couple of games. You're right. Difference maker, Sam Kerr. And it just really makes you change the way you look at Australia, perhaps in this group and in this tournament.
It makes the parity in Canada's group all the more interesting. And that 4-5-1, I will say, watching that, maybe it was my delirium of the fact that it was 6 a.m. and I just finished watching the Aussies go, or the Kiwis go at 3 a.m. But that 4-5-1 from Ireland does not look fun to play against. They have some speed on the wings. Speaking of health and fitness, Jessie Fleming is the talk of Canadian camps and supporters right now. Everyone watching, binoculars and telescopes are out. How much is Jessie participating? Will she be ready to go? It does not seem likely that she will be able to go a full 90 if she can even start Canada's opener tonight against Nigeria. How much of a blow would this be for the Canadians, Ollie? It seems like if they needed to bubble wrap any one player, it needed to be Jessie Fleming.
Yeah, it's a blow. I think you've got to be very careful and remember that we're hoping this is a long tournament and you want Jessie Fleming available for the latter stages. I like the natural change would be, if it would be a change, because I don't know what Bev Priestman was thinking in the first place, but that Christine Sinclair starts, right? And the debate around whether or not she would play kind of ends there. Sinclair plays the 10. You've got Quinn, you've got Grosso, still some good options in central midfield. Sophie Schmidt, if you want more experience in this first game. And then likely Jordan Heitmer up front. So I think there's still a lineup that Canada can put out that should be able to win this game against Nigeria. But certainly not just looking at this game, but looking at the tournament as a whole, you want Jessie Fleming at her best, in a rhythm, and feeling like she's in this tournament and kind of getting her legs underneath her as early as possible as we go into the really decisive games here.
She might be the most important Canadian player, in fairness, because she plays a position and a role that, no one else really can fill. She's a penalty taker for this Canada side as well. It's a substantial miss if she can't go. I'd be shocked if she starts against Nigeria tonight. Just everything that you see, everything that you hear, it would be a real shock. And this could be something that would maybe perhaps force Christine Sinclair into a starting role. She did speak in the pre-match press conference, not only because she's a captain, but I kind of had doubts whether there was a spot for Christine Sinclair in the starting 11 if Jessie Fleming didn't play. And if Sinclair comes in out of the gate, will she have to be managed? Can she play 90 minutes? I think this provides a significant headache for Bev Priestman. But a lot of mind games are being played right now in terms of Priestman, just in terms of what she's saying, what she isn't saying. There's mixed messages. There's statements that she's gone out to say that contradict other statements that she's gone on to say about Jessie Fleming. So it's a little bit of a mystery. From the school of John Herdman, the two are close. They're friends. They used to coach one another. So misdirection all over the place. And we certainly won't know until the team's on the field. But from where I'm sitting here today, which is a world away from Australia, by the way, I would be absolutely shocked if Jessie Fleming's in the starting 11. I don't think she'll even play tonight, my personal feel. But what do I know? I'm in Canada right now.
We are in Canada right now. And this Canadian women's national team ranks 7th in the world. Bev said it herself. She doesn't think that there's much in the top 10. In terms of who's the best, who's next best. The top 10 doesn't matter. It's the tiers that we hear so much about. Sometimes makes your eyes want to fall out of your head. But Canada is a top 10 team. They begin their tournament tonight. But most importantly, of course, they are the defending Olympic champion. Gareth, your expectations, what are they? What would be a successful World Cup and what would be a disappointing World Cup?
Better than the last couple World Cups. This team has proven to be a juggernaut, an absolute powerhouse in terms of Olympic football and World Cup football. It hasn't quite been it for whatever reason. It's a better tournament. It's more difficult. Teams like France and Germany weren't in the Olympics. They're going to be in this tournament. They got to go beyond the group. They got to go deeper than the quarterfinals, in my opinion. This whole idea of Canada being disrespected, Yeah, in terms of maybe some of the global awards, Christine Sinclair not winning player of the year. Okay, perhaps, but also teams that win get rewarded for having the top players on their teams. I think that this is a motivational technique. And I actually think they've quite frankly underachieved at the World Cup. Like at a home World Cup, England wasn't strong at that time. They had defensive errors, selection, but mistakes in 2015 that cost them on home soil. And then losing in the round of 16 against Sweden last time out. A good Sweden team, not a great Sweden team. They couldn't get anything going from an attacking perspective. They missed a penalty in that game. It was very difficult to watch. I just don't think that they've been great in recent World Cups. So the pressure's on. Like I think the expectation amongst Canadians that this team has despite their absences and injuries, has a shot at going on and winning this tournament. And if you're going to be a contender, you need to be looking at the semifinals here. That needs to be the bar. You need to be in the top 4. That's where I think it should be for this Canadian team.
Hello, what do you think?
Yeah, I'll go a little bit different. And this may well result in a semi-final appearance if they're able to achieve this. But for me, it's a success if you have one signature knockout stage win. Like that is something that they haven't actually done in a little while, or haven't done on a regular basis, at least, right? So again, that could depend in terms of what round it is. It could depend on where they finish in the group. If they win the group, it's more likely to be in the quarterfinal, which would get them to that semi-final stage that Wheels pointed out. But yeah, I want to see them beat a big team in the knockout stage. If you're really going to say that this is a successful World Cup for Canada, and successful not just in the sense of meeting kind of the minimum expectation of getting out of the group, they need to beat a big team in a meaningful game in the knockout stage. That's where I'd put the bar for them in terms of really judging whether or not this team has played to its full potential at this tournament. Whether you can beat 3 of them and win the tournament, it's really hard for anyone, including the United States, including the best teams in the world. But there's got to be one really meaningful win for Canada here.
They did in the Olympics, Ollie. That's what's crazy. And I know there wasn't people in the crowds, and it was a little bit different. The Olympics, just the entire setup is different than the World Cup. But they beat Brazil, the United States, and Sweden on their way to winning Olympic gold. Like that's a tough a tough route. So I think that's what the expectation has to be. Anything else, I think it would be a massive letdown at this tournament.